Political Fixer Live. Good evening, everyone. I am your host, Shauna Presley Vircher, and usually it's hard to pick which topics we're going to talk about in a given week. This week, I actually think the responsibility falls on all of you. I'm going to go right out on a limb right now and say the problem is not selecting the stories to cover this evening. The problem is going to be, are you going to believe me? Because the chaos, the insanity, these stories are out there even for these particularly weird times. But we're going to do our best. And let's talk about what we're going to cover on this episode of Political Fixer Live. As usual, we've drawn three top stories for the week. It was difficult to choose and even more difficult to nail down exactly how deep we were going to go on each one. First, we're going to look at the Supreme Court because apparently they're not done wrecking the country yet. So, we're going to talk about three different things that are coming up that you should pay attention to, what they mean, why they matter, and what you should be on the lookout for. So, we'll definitely be talking about our lovely, lovely Supreme Court. Plus, DC has been taken over. And no, this is not a complaint about the latest Superman movie. I am talking about Washington, DC. We have some big developments that, in my opinion, possibly aren't being covered in a way that I feel like is appropriate for the moment we might now be in. But I'm going to lay the groundwork for you, give you a little bit of backstory, and then you tell me, what do you think about what's happening in DC right now? Or am I overreacting? But first, before we get into those stories, we're going to ask a really important question, which is, can you gaslight an entire nation? Because one man is on a quest with his administration to do exactly that. We're going to talk about what information is being fed to us, what information is disappearing in front of our very eyes, and what can we do about any of it. So we'll definitely dive into that. Um, in addition, we're going to be, of course, taking your questions, your comments, your takes on all of these stories. We're going to want to hear your facts and information. Some of you are experts in different fields, so we love it when you share information with us. And, we have our political fixer team here, and I know we'll have a bunch of family members as well. So, advanced hello to all of our political fixer family, those of you that join us week after week and support us so much. We're already at over 1,000 likes. We're going to dive in just a second. But first, I have one thing to ask for you. I want you to please mark your calendars for Tuesday, September 2nd. Tuesday, September 2nd. We are going to be on location for a couple of different projects over the next couple of weeks, and internet is going to be iffy. So, we're going to not do lives for just 2 weeks, but we will be posting content as we can. Our Equal Rights Now projects, our Safety Over Seekers projects, our Political Fixer projects, those are going to keep going. But our next Political Fixer Live is going to be Tuesday, September 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, same bat time, same bat channel. So I just want to make sure you guys have that. And we'll mention it a few more times throughout the show. But again, whenever I go missing, I know people get worried. So no worries there. All right, let's talk about gaslighting. And thank you to all of the people with your lovely gifts and all of the likes. It means so much to my team and I. But I'm worried that maybe you won't be so happy with so much kind of intense news that we're going to be covering. It wasn't too long ago in March, though that feels like years ago. It wasn't too long ago that we got the news that certain branches of the military, at the behest of the Pentagon and them at the behest of Orange 47, that they were purging different bits of historic information and facts from the various military sites. The purges were considered a DEI purge, as in diversity, equity, inclusion. And if there's one thing we don't want in our military boys and girls, it's for everyone to feel included as they're fighting to save our country. So the purge included war heroes, historic figures, different events that they were just erasing. And they were erasing them from official databases. There were over 26,000 images that were removed. There was over 100,000 that were flagged to be removed. They were removing a vast number of stories that were notable milestones in the military, particularly that mentioned um, involving Hispanic people, Black people, and women. So just complete erasure of part of our military history. They also were doing a search for the word gay, which was particularly interesting because there is a B-29 aircraft named Enola Gay, that it was the aircraft that dropped the first atomic bomb in World War II. And so all of that was just erased, at least temporarily. So, Tuskegee Airmen, a lot of that stripped down, different military heroes that were women completely stripped down, right? So that was in March, and just a complete erasure of history. They were just getting started. Again, every single time something is done by this administration, they wait to see if there's any pushback and then they push harder. The Smithsonian was asked to remove references of 47's impeachments from the display in the Smithsonian that talks about presidential impeachments. So it's an exhibit that is called The Limits of Presidential Power. And it talks about the different times that presidents have been impeached. And right now, it only lists three impeachment proceedings: Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and of course, Bill Clinton. But the only president in American history to be impeached twice doesn't appear anywhere. At first, they said, oh, this is just temporary. We're refurbishing the exhibit. Oh, it'll be back soon. Don't worry about it. But then it came out, actually, no, this isn't temporary at all. In fact, it's part of a much bigger effort. It was announced that the Smithsonian is under a mandatory review where all of the exhibits are now going to have to be reviewed by this administration to make sure that they match his understanding of history. So I'm assuming everything's going to need to be in crayon and use little words. They are going to have to ensure alignment with 47's vision, and this is all confirmed. It's in writing. This is not something that we are surmising. It's not something that we're guessing. It's not that people noticed a few things missing. This has been confirmed that they have received a letter. The secretary of the Smithsonian said that they would be doing a quote comprehensive internal review, that they would focus on all of the exhibitions and museums, including areas that face with any public facing content, so all of it then, and also future exhibition planning. They are getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the nation's founding. So, what better way than to erode free speech, education, and a telling of our history? So, it's an executive order. And again, the question for tonight is how much of this is believable? It's an executive order titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, because in recent years it's come under the influence of race-centered ideology, blah blah blah, propaganda. Okay, so they're going to have someone in the White House go through and have to approve every single exhibit in the Smithsonian and make sure it matches with their version of history. So if any of you have ever been to the Smithsonian, it's ginormous. There's multiple buildings. You can't possibly see it all in one day, but it has everything from and it had things like the infamous lunch counter from the civil rights era, where the young people put their hands on the lunch counter and refused to move. That has been removed. They're going through the Black History Museum and removing unsettling facts about Black history. They've removed things about women in history. They've completely erased people from history and are just getting started. And as if that's not bad enough, when we're talking about completely rewriting what's happening, the erasure is not limited to the past. We're going to go ahead and erase what's happening in the future. I'm talking about our economics data. For any of you who have been following, and it's kind of depressing, so I get it if you haven't been, any of the labor and economic statistics, we got a really bad job report the other day. Not only were the jobs much lower than were anticipated, but they actually revised the previous reports to say, actually, we didn't have as many jobs as we thought. And that caused a lot of people to be upset, including people in the stock market, temporarily for what it's worth. And when they did so, then they announced these numbers, which are compiled with a process that is so lengthy and has so much audit to it. It's not a person just putting their finger up to the wind and saying how many jobs do they feel like we created. It's a pretty extensive process. And so they fired the person in charge of that. And while we're on the subject of gaslighting, we were all told during the election that he has no understanding of Project 2025 made by the Heritage Foundation. You're never going to guess who they put in charge now of the labor statistics, one of the architects and spokespeople for Project 2025. Now, there was some concern in the economy across party lines, across business sectors, because if we don't have reliable economic data, then that causes a ripple effect. First of all, it makes us less trustworthy overall as a nation with other partners. People have difficulty predicting different things and making business decisions. The list goes on and on and on. So the concern was going to be that they were going to fudge with the numbers and make them look good. Good news, that's not what's happening. No worry about having bad numbers. We're just not going to have numbers at all. It came out just today that the new Bureau of Labor Statistics head, Mr. Antoni, is saying we're just not going to publish these numbers anymore. I hope that's cool with you. They said it's complicated. They said that they having trouble getting it accurate. So for our own safety and well-being, let's just not put out any economic data at all. And the gaslighting continues. All right. Let's take some audience feedback here. Let me ask you, Political Fixer family, are you starting to get worried about the stuff that's disappearing, the stuff that's not being said, the stuff that we are erasing or changing, right? Square Foot Gardening for You says, why is it none of the other labor statistics people had trouble with the numbers? Rachel is having trouble. Yeah, Rachel, you're in my place that I was before. Yeah, so Rachel's also asking, can we recover from this? So that's a great question. So we definitely spent a lot of time talking about the problem. Let me say that there are a lot of people that are taking it upon themselves and have been quietly for months going in and archiving things in a systematic way as quickly as possible. And they escalated that over the last several months. When they knew he was coming in, these very smart individuals, just volunteers out in the country, just started buying up server space and saying, let's save as much of this as we can while we still have access to it. So there are unnamed amazing heroes that are out there that are trying to preserve data. Plus, keep in mind, we have official artifacts. We have an official record that we used to be able to rely on for historical stuff, but there's so many people that keep accounts of different segments of history. Is it possible to reconstruct most, if not all of this? Yes. The other good news is, there are other places we can go for information. When we're talking about medical information, other countries have research. Other countries are continuing advancements in medicine. Is this a setback, what we're seeing here? Absolutely. But they're not going to wait for us. So there's going to be other countries' research that continues, advancements will still happen. In addition to that, there's going to be continued research and documentation. Will we be able to get economics data in this reliable way? Some of it. ADP, the paychecks processor, I don't know how many of you get a paycheck physically anymore, but used to, I remember I got paychecks and it had ADP on it, right? They're one of the number one payroll processors in the country, and they publish data. For now, different state unemployment bureaus publish data. And also, forget the data for just a second. If a family doesn't have a job, they notice. You can't you cannot convince them that they're working, right? I see someone talking about a photo project. I would love to see your photo project, Sarah. Make sure you get their information. Absolutely. I hope it's all photos of me. I'm just kidding. I just had a little Miss Piggy moment there. Anyway, so yes, Rachel and others, I do think that there's a way to definitely recover some of this, but it's not going to be easy. And spoiler alert, I think it's going to get worse. But let me tell you why I think this particular and all of the stuff with all of the dumpster fire that is this administration. And I say this as someone who today found out that on the 250th anniversary of our nation, on July 4th of next year, we're going to have a UFC cage match on the White House lawn. What? Okay. So, as bad as all of this is going to get, here's why I think we need to be mindful of this. Okay, first of all, if you are in a job of any kind of position that relies on this data, if you're someone who personally, for health reasons, relies on data, the idea of let me go to the official government websites has to stop right now. We're going to have to find and I think work together to compile other sources of reliable data that hasn't been commercialized. For example, I wouldn't get global warming data from Exxon's research company, right? We got to find people that are reliable and start gathering data that we can trust. So, as much as we talk about trusting sources, it's going to be even more important now. But the other thing is your own mental health. Let me tell you what I mean. I want to talk a little bit about the word that I used at the beginning of this segment, which is gaslighting. This is a word that got more popular in the 60s. Actually, there was a movie about it and that kind of put it into pop culture. But this is a word that's normally associated with abuse. And it's different than lying. It's become a more popular word, but I wanted to dig into it for just a second. When you lie, it means you make a statement that is false and you know that it's not true. When you gaslight, it means that not only are you making the false statement, but you're trying to manipulate the person into believing a false truth. When you're lying, you're trying to hide something or just avoid consequences. But when you're gaslighting, you're trying to get them unstable. You're trying to get them to kind of question everything. You're kind of trying to put them on mental tilt, so to speak. So lying would be like, I didn't take that money when you know that you did take the money, right? Gaslighting would be, no, I didn't take the money. Don't you remember? I handed it to you. Oh, you're so forgetful. And it causes people to feel off balance. And if any of you have ever been victims of gaslighting, it doesn't matter what strong of a person you are, how intelligent you are, over time, it does start to wear you down mentally with your mental health. So not only do you start to doubt yourself and start to doubt your trust, but you also start to doubt organizations and institutions. And it has a longer term psychological impact because it causes anxiety. You no longer know what you can trust. It causes you to feel hopeless and helpless. And on top of that, it makes you feel kind of trapped because you're stuck with this indecision. You don't know what you can trust, so you don't feel like you can trust your own decision making abilities. It's why it is so typically aligned with abuse. So now we have a serial alleged abuser. We know this about him. We know who he is. We've heard woman after woman after woman, small business owner that didn't get paid, employee that got harassed, tenants that were denied access. We've seen him on stage mocking, calling for violence. We know that this is an abusive guy. And now, instead of gaslighting a partner or gaslighting a family member, this individual is trying to gaslight an entire nation. So, what can we do about it? Um, so there's something called DARVO that I want to share with you. And this is something that I learned when I was working, particularly in legislation having to do with preventing women's abuse in different states and different areas. DARVO is DARVO, and it stands for you deny, you attack, you reverse the victim and the offender. So basically, I didn't do that. You're the problem. And then this person becomes the victim and it's all their fault. This guy, Taco is Darvo, right? Taco is Darvo, right? And so I see some of you that are saying every woman who's ever been in an abusive relationship recognizes 47's abusive behavior. That is 100% true. There are a lot of women that do not watch him, right? Catsy's is sharing this up. Rachel is saying 100%. I'm sorry that we're talking about something so intense, but I want to protect you moving forward. Why bring this forward? Okay. We know what they're trying to do. So, what can we do about it? So, first of all, find your own sources of information. It is healthy to pay attention to what's going on in society. We don't want people checking out, we don't want people to not care. But with all of this nonsense, it is okay to not read every story. It's okay to not have the news on all the time in your house 24 hours a day. It is okay to look at something and be like, oh, okay, that sucks bad, but I can only focus on this. I'm choosing to focus on these 2 or 3 subject areas. I'm gonna stay really aware of what's happening in this area that impacts my family, this area that I'm passionate about, and this area because I think it's the right thing to do. Pick 2 or 3 things and pay attention to those. I do not believe that it is healthy to try to take in all of this and to just Joe Eclectic say, yes, Monday I took a break from all of the news. Mental health breaks are going to become super important, but I'm going to go one step further. When you start to feel yourself going down this, what is even happening? This isn't real. Don't just take a break, but also look for us, right? Look for your fixer family, look for positivity, reach out and DM some of the people that you see here, or, reach out to us or find other positive people. They might not get back to you, but if you say something positive, it's still a tether, right? If you post something like, listen, having a down day, somebody send me photos of your cats, even something like that, reach out to your people because it's going to feel sometimes like we're the only ones that are seeing this. Like, you see that, right? Like, that's crazy, right? And so many other people are going to be responsible people, heads of news organizations, presidents of colleges, people that are in charge of stock portfolios, very respectable adult humans are going to tell us now, there, you are overreacting. How many of you have heard that over the last several years, right? And yet here we are. So surround yourself with your people and replenish and rehydrate, right? So, really important that you know what's going on. Really important that we stay connected to each other, which is why I am so appreciative to be here with all of you and some of the content you all produce and the stuff you're working on. I love it so much. You're just doing amazing work. So let's call out some of you amazing people. I see Katsy saying lots of beautiful older ladies in her community, very wise. I see that Jen is sharing what she experienced with domestic violence, and this hits home. And what she did in the past, just waiting for it. It is very strange how this is so triggering. So I do apologize for that. We're going to move on to stuff that is less triggering, though arguably not necessarily more sunshine. But also the flip side is how we can look at each other across a room, across a device, and be like, yep, I see it too. And so if you don't have that across your room, then I want you to know you have it across your device. I want you to know you have it across the country or across the planet or wherever or across the neighborhood. I don't know where all of you are, but you have it, right? You're not what you're seeing is not crazy. And share it with us so we can start, amplifying it and researching it and all of this stuff, or at least reassuring you like, yeah, yes, this is awful, but here's the good news or here's what we're going to do about it, right? um okay. I know this has been a lot, but let's talk about how great all of you are. We're only on our first story out of 3, and we are at already 22,000 likes. Is amazing. I want to shout out Divine AF Girl, Square Foot Gardening, Joe Eclectic, Julia, Dirty Bad Bloggers. We've got Jenny Bean, which is amazing, who's new to the Political Fixer family. Welcome. Equivana, what a great name, is definitely, so you just joined the fan club. I really don't know what that means, but that is amazing. Thank you, TikTok, for giving me 85 things to understand. I need a college student to explain it to me. I also want to thank Dr. Keisha Davis and also Sharon Cryer for sharing this live with other people. It means a lot to me that you think that your audience would want to participate in this conversation. Let's take some of your comments. All right, Kathy is saying the biggest criminal in Washington is the president of the United States, mentioning the felony counts again. Okay, so Lo-Fi Junkie is asking how long until textbooks and curriculum in public school adhere to his vision. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing that they have different curriculum that they're replacing. This has been going on quietly for years in certain red states. I actually had a good friend that I went to high school with that his job was to go back and re-edit Texas history books, and he was like, I need a new job. They were just making him erase stuff. So we're already seeing that. I think it's going to depend on the state, unfortunately. So for those of us that are in red states, we have to look for other supplemental curriculum. And I also think that bigger project, we really need, this is the time that we need more Schoolhouse Rocks and Sesame Street and other things to fill in these gaps. Mrs. Q, do not feel hopeless. Don't feel hopeless here. I know that this is hard. It is. It is. But you know what? The last time that we were this low, we swung back and we made so many societal improvements. I think I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but here's what I'll say is the good thing about what's happening. Can we do a quick rundown of positive things, like real positive things? Number one, for years and years and years, people thought it didn't matter who we had in power. Both sides are the same. It doesn't matter. Who really cares? How does the government impact me anyway? We now have an electorate and a nation and a planet actually that's paying attention. So, this is an excellent opportunity to engage people and to educate them and to bring them into our communities, large and small, personal and online, so that we can move forward. Because if people check out of our process, we're not always going to get, Orange Marshmallow Man, but we're going to get idiots. I mean, to be fair, we've had some not so great people in charge for quite some time. Not evil. I'm not trying to liken the two, but it would be much better if people actually paid attention during the job interview process of elections, right? So that's point one. People are getting engaged. They are saying that this stuff matters. Yay. Number two, people are not waiting for permission. There are so many local organizations, online groups, student organizations, and communities like these that are not waiting. They're just forming, and we're doing whatever work we can together. Some of it is information and education like this. Some of it is more trainings that we're going to do more of. And I know a lot of you are doing things. So we're not alone in any of this, and people are moving things forward. And number three, let me point out, yes, they are breaking a lot of things because it's really easy to break stuff. But also, this is a small group of idiots. How small? All of them have like 5 or 6 jobs, right? The real world guy, we talked about this last week, he's now in charge of NASA. Marco Rubio is now in charge of the archives. Like, everybody's got 5 or 6 jobs. Why? Because this dude doesn't have a lot of friends and they're shrinking by the day, right? There's a lot more of us than there are of them, and it's not working out the same. It's just not. So, is it going to be hard? Absolutely. But it's also not hopeless. Not hopeless at all. But great question. Um, I definitely see, like Nick is saying, we need to eliminate the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. That boat is sailing. I would say, the Heritage Foundation, have my own opinions on that. But what we need is something that is a vision for the left that we can all craft together and get behind. Um, Putting it back the way it was, there's a reason we got here. It all doesn't fall on one person. There was systemic issues, and many of us could talk for quite a while about how the system was already rigged. It wasn't fair. It was set up for abuse and set up for, different people to succeed while others failed. It wasn't a perfect system. So let's not go back to that. Let's aim for higher, right? Universal healthcare. Hallelujah to that, right? Food being a basic human right. I love all of this. And I know that Professor Liberty Esquire, who sometimes joins our program, she's working on literally a new Bill of Human Rights to add to the other ones, right? I know a lot of people are working on this. And yeah, I do. I don't say his name. Someone's asking why I don't say his name because he's a narcissist. And so it really bothers them when you don't say their name. And also, I think it gives him a certain power. He's nothing. He's a temporary speck of dust in time. So that's why I don't say his name, is because it really bothers a narcissist when you don't. And also, I don't want to give it more power. Poop to toe is poop to toe. Sorry, pup to toe. I don't know how to say your username. I'm sorry. How do you handle family when they are all MAGA in a red state? Limited interactions of love, and then find your other people for your own mental health. I'm not saying disown them. I wouldn't speak to that. I'm not saying that they're awful people. There are people that fell for it. There are people that get conned. There are people that buy into it because their own situations are so desperate that they need something and someone to blame it on. There's also awful people So don't get me wrong, there are some awful MAGA, but everyone who voted for him does not fit in that category. We know that. We know a lot of people. They already have up to 16% of people that say they voted for him saying that they deeply regret it. So it's happening. So if they're open to conversation and you have the patience and love to do it, that's a great opportunity. But for your own mental health, just make sure that you decide what your boundaries are ahead of time. Get in and get out on those family engagements and look for those symbols where it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot I had this thing that I have to do exactly right now. And I say this as someone who has a very diverse family. And sometimes I have that thing that I have to do right now. But great question. Um, Joe Katsy's talking about gaslighting as a psyop. Absolutely. Okay, we so much great content and a lot of it from all of you. Thank you so much. Let's keep going. You know, people are talking about so many great conversations. So let's keep those conversations going in the chat, especially those of you that are opening up about your own situations. And I know Sarah is on the case as usual. She's capturing as much of this as we can to try to get back to you. Let's keep going with our next news story. Let's talk about the Supreme Court. I know we're going to get a little deeper. It's a little rough, and I apologize to everyone, but we got to talk about what's coming. I'm going to give you 3 cases to look out for. We're going to talk about what to watch for and what it all means. And then, of course, we're going to find what the solutions could be together. On October 8th, the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments about a case that was based in Illinois. And the case has to do with Representative Mike Bost and 2 other Republicans who challenged the grace period for ballots and how long how long they have to challenge ballots. They're basically saying that this causes injury, that they should be entitled to challenge for longer. They should have more of an ability to essentially say that they think there's a problem with some of the people who voted in an election. The Supreme Court has said they will hear this case, and this is on October 8th. So let's talk in plain English what this means. And I'm not an attorney, so any of you attorneys or legal scholars or policymakers, feel free to jump in here. But my layperson's understanding of this is, do any of you guys remember in North Carolina, I want to say, that judge that was elected and her opponent just kept challenging and kept challenging. And he was saying, oh, your vote shouldn't count because you were overseas. The reason you're overseas is because you're a military person or a military spouse, but we shouldn't count your vote. And it lasted months. The danger of this particular case to keep an eye out for is that if this goes through and the Supreme Court says, yeah, you can just keep challenging, that all of the elections will remain in flux as long as you have one person that's willing to dig in their heels and lie and pay for a bunch of fancy attorneys to glue up the works, and you'll have just chaos with the election process and its stability. Will there be any boundaries or limits set by the Supreme Court? If you're a betting person, I would say probably not. But the good news is that there is the ability to either pass federal legislation, probably not with this Congress, but hopefully with another one, but also states can do things. They can implement different laws at a state level that says, no, this is how you do it here. And if you're going to run for these offices, then you have to follow our rules, right? So that is the first case to keep an eye out for. Now, keep in mind, they're hearing these arguments on October 8th at the Supreme Court. That doesn't mean, like, unfortunately, it's not like People's Court, which I used to love that show. I still remember, like, this one, like, do you have to have a water fountain that works in the skating rink? I loved that episode. Anyway, so it's not People's Court. We're not going to find out in like an hour, right? It could take months for us to find out what's going on, but you should kind of pay attention to what's going on with the Supreme Court and what happens. And as people are moving things forward, kind of keep your ear to the ground about how we can put other laws in action, how we can pressure our local electeds to counterbalance whatever chaos the Supreme Court unleashes again. The second case I want to talk to you about is another voting rights case. Surprise! So this one is set to be heard a week later on October 15th, but again, we won't get the decision right away. It could be months. And this time they are literally looking at the Voting Rights Act, a key provision in the Voting Rights Act, and asking, is it constitutional? There's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot of made up nonsense that they're using, in my opinion, to bring this forward. It has to do with the redistricting case in Louisiana. Basically, the Voting Rights Act is supposed to make sure there is fair and equal access to voting, but also fair and equal access to representation. And what we're seeing now in Texas and other states, the gerrymandering, the drawing the crazy lines and then looping this one in and donut holing over here to make it where it's almost impossible to lose power. That's one issue. Making it where it's not really a representative democracy, another issue. But also, these lines are intentionally drawn partially based on race. And they are targeting primarily the people who serve in these current seats that are people of color. And we've already had rulings on this. We've already seen that if you're not going to make it fair, there's supposed to be a national voting rights act that says if there is this percentage of people of color in the community in your state, then they should have a proportionate number of representatives. These people say no. They describe themselves as non African American voters. Cryptic. And they're saying that we shouldn't protect the ability for particularly Black Americans to be represented in our democracy. That's what's at stake. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that there's something that can be done. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act was introduced into Congress a number of times. Would any of you like to guess who voted for it and who voted against it? Again, this idea that both parties are not that both parties are the same is nonsense. Democrats voted for the Voting Rights Act, Republicans voted against the Voting Rights Act. It is as simple as that. But assuming that we make it across the finish line and whatever it looks like, we have some semblance of fair elections in November, which is a lot of assumptions, I understand, but let's think positively and work towards that goal. Then there is an opportunity to actually implement Voting Rights Act at a federal level. Congressionally, that's the option. At a statewide level, start voting these yahoos out of office that are corrupt, and states at the legislative level can fix some of this gerrymandering. We're seeing this where, to the Democrats' credit, and I've been very critical of some of their slow response sometimes, so I will own that. But right now, there are a number of Democratic states saying if you're going to gerrymander states like Texas, I see you, Texas, and I raise you, California, New York, Illinois, and Colorado. So it's about to get very, very interesting. The last I saw, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, gave them 24 hours to stop with the nonsense in Texas, or he was going to move forward whatever constitutional amendments they needed to do in the statewide level to move their own gerrymandering process forward. So lots of stuff happening with this. That's your second case to keep up with. So when you see this and they're talking about the Voting Rights Act, you're like, what does this have to do with me? I've never had a problem voting. I never even really stand in a long line. That's great for you, but this actually impacts all of us because this could make it essentially legal to gerrymander the country. And so we got to keep an eye on that. Third case, this one's fun. It was announced that the Supreme Court is being asked to review an existing case and overturn it. I am talking about the case that legalizes same sex marriage. The Supreme Court has been asked to review the same sex marriage case that they actually passed the 10 years ago. And they said that the claim is that Obergefell, which is how it's known, Obergefell versus Hodges, that it is egregiously wrong and it is a violation of First Amendment protections for the freedom of religion. Okay, this is a credible story. We did vet it beforehand. There is a group of people who are bringing forward this case. Now, I'm not an attorney. Some people are saying they don't have standing. Well, they found someone that they said does have religious and legal standing in this case, according to these attorneys. Her name, you might vaguely remember, is Kim Davis. If you don't remember Kim Davis, I guarantee you probably remember the story that made her famous several years ago. Kim Davis was the Kentucky clerk that wouldn't issue a gay marriage license. And so she was then ultimately jailed for her beliefs. She said that she was following God's word and it made her famous. People were paying her bills, they were sending her donations. She said that it would violate God's definition of marriage. So let's hear her out, shall we? Let's talk about Kim Davis because she doesn't believe that a man should get married to a man. She doesn't believe that a woman should get married to a woman. Forget that it doesn't impact her life whatsoever. Forget that no one is forcing this upon anyone. If you don't want to marry anyone, no one is forcing you to. No one is indoctrinating your children. But what should a marriage be? Let's ask Kim Davis. Kim Davis was married at the age of 18 in 1984. And then she got divorced about 10 years later. And if you're doing math, I love math, 5 months after she left the husband, then she gave birth to twins. Congratulations, by another man. Oh, okay. Then she got married again. Then she got divorced again in 2006. This was a third man, if you're keeping track. So there was the husband, then there was the baby's daddy, and then there was a third guy. And so the third guy was the father of the twins. That's nice. They reconciled. That marriage lasted less than a year. And then she went back and married another guy. So just listen, kids at home. Marriage should never, ever be between a man or a woman and a woman. It should be as God intended, between a woman and a man and her adulterous affair partner that impregnates her and another guy, and then later the adulterous partner, as God intended in the Bible. Yeah, that's their case. Okay, so on the one hand, some people are saying this is a weak case. This is never going to go anywhere. It doesn't have standing. I'm not an attorney. I would offer just my humble counterpoint to these very thought out legal arguments that I've been seeing online since this got announced a couple of days ago. First point, I was told in very uncertain terms that there was absolutely no legal standing or way that this Supreme Court was going to reverse Roe v. Wade. I was assured that by many people that are super smart and have a lot more degrees and went to a lot more classes than I did at Florida State. So I was told by really smart people that Roe v. Wade was impossible to reverse. That's the first point. And my second counterpoint would be that what are laws? Because I haven't seen many of that lately. I've been told laws are optional, due process only counts sometimes. We'll just fix what we don't like. There's no such thing as congressional oversight. I was also told that after we got done picking on disabled reporters and we got done picking on women's health care, we got done picking on trans kids, we got done picking on immigrants, and we got done picking on women of color that were in the military and serving government positions. Like after we got done with all that, I thought they were going to be done. They weren't going to pick on any other marginalized groups. So I'm super shocked that they're coming after gay marriage. How about you? Are you surprised? Are you surprised that this is happening? First of all, do you think the Supreme Court will take up the case? Let me just ask that. Not just attorneys. I just want your opinion. Do you think the Supreme Court will take up this gay marriage case and wreck the case that they issued? Another Roe v. Wade, but this time for same sex marriage. Do you think they'll do that? And are you surprised, A, that it's happening? And B, that they're being so open with a plan? Because they've been telling us, oh, we don't have a problem with you, just this other marginalized group. No, you're good. It's just trans people. No, no, no. Women are safe. It's totally fine. It's just the women of color that are a problem, right? We've been told all of this over and over and over, right? And they just keep pushing and pushing. Why? Hold on, I got this. Okay. Why be normal t-shirt shop. Got it. I had to read it like it's almost like a little test for my eyes, some of these names. Surprised at how fast the agenda is moving. Why be normal thinks yes, the Supreme Court will overturn. Kenny says thinks they will overturn. Joe Eclectic says looks like SCOTUS is going to destroy everything we thought for. KB Looksy, such great names, says yes, they will. Brianna's saying no, no. I don't know if it's about me and what I'm sharing or if that's your response to what's happening. Julie is saying not surprised. Why wouldn't they, according to Jack's very good point. Judy Judge says nothing surprises me anymore. Judy Judge, if you're not surprised, that's not good for all of us. Edna asked, "Do you realize how many Republicans are closeted?" I would go one step further, Edna, and say there are a number of prominent gay couples who donated and fundraised for 47 and for DeSantis, told that their rights would be protected. And I say that for a couple of reasons. First, stop giving to people who beat up on other people. They're going to come for you. They're going to come for you, right? There were Venezuelans for Trump. How is that working out, right? They're going to come for you. That's what bullies do. They get tired of punching this kid and they just punch the next kid. So I think, yes, on closeted people, but also I think just people that thought that they were safe, that they were protected, and that they have means and money. And so everything would be fine. Um, so, Leah's saying, under the desk news has been talking about this seriously, though Leah doesn't think it's going to happen. Um, so, Professor Liberty Esquire asking what Thiel's take is on this. I think he's busy trying to stop women from voting. I don't know if he's waiting on this, Alex. So, Kate Awakening, adding to my comeuppance point, the Latino man who owned the Trump burger place, who is now saying they overstayed his visa. And so now they're talking about moving him out of the country or wherever. So, I don't know what's gonna happen on this stuff. What can we do about it? That's always the case, right? The first thing I'll say, let me just be really clear. If you are currently in a same-sex marriage, they're saying that no matter what, don't worry, they're not gonna annul that for whatever that's worth. But we are seeing that this is what I would say. What are differences we can make in our own community? First of all, I would like to not repeat mistakes. I would love it if instead, when someone's like, I'm concerned about my rights, we don't all say, oh, it'll be fine. That's not productive. And it also hasn't been true. So I think acknowledging that mistake that some of us have made, I think that would be helpful, that we try to be there for each other's communities. Um, I think also, as we're talking about this, I think we need to give it the gravity it deserves. That it matters what the ruling is, but it almost, I would argue, matters as much that we're in polite society now vilifying people based on who they love again. How are we back here? How are we back here? We need to articulate how unacceptable that is. We have to call that out. Yes, even with some of us who have, MAGA family members. Yes, especially that this is ridiculous. Stop picking on people because of who they worship, who they love, what they do, how they want to dress. It's insane. That is the opposite of freedom. So the fact that we're going backwards like this, I think we have to go noisy. If they're going to try to push us back, if it's a game of tug of war, we have to pull. We have to pull our side, right? So Brianna's mentioning, coalition building. The Nev says we never left hating for no reason. You're right. To be fair, Nev, a lot of this prejudice and racism and misogyny and all of the bigotry, it's been here. It's been here. But I would say, like, this willingness to be proud stupid is kind of new. I mean, even back in the day, they were hiding their faces, right? Like, the proud stupid is a new one. So I think we shouldn't celebrate it or just look away. That I think that's gonna be really important, right? Also social media making the hate louder, great, right? I agree, Professor Liberty Esquire, we have to make the gerrymandering, we have to fight it with fire until it's illegal. Jen is bringing up great points, the making 14-year-olds adults. Yes, and then we have Justice for All talking about we are Gilead. Is it Gilead or Gilead? Um, Lots of things to talk about. CJ Murphy, overturning a Obergefell is going to have devastating consequences for same-sex couples. I'm worried about my family. I've been with my wife for 23 years, and Clarence Thomas brought up a Obergefell in his opinion while overturning Roe v. Wade specifically. CJ, you're correct. I had forgotten that. Forgive me, everyone. Absolutely. And Kelly and CJ are both saying that there's a list of paperwork under the desk news provides for free that you can fill out and keep on hand for your safety. I think that's really important. Brianna May is mentioning Dems need to stop looking at the rule book when MAGA burned it. I will say the Dem institution, slow to adapt. We're seeing that, but we're seeing more and more Dems fighting. I saw Beto had an arrest warrant issued for him. That nonsense in Texas is getting real and really crazy. And they said, you violated a rule. And his response was, F the rules. So some of them are getting it. Some of them are getting it. So um, also bringing up that the GOP does not have the trifecta they need. If they had all the power they need, they wouldn't be trying to steal more. So again, that is another silver lining. The question, can all of those states really change districts before 2026? And I'm going to say, is it Makoob? Is that how you pronounce your name? Your handle there? Yes, the answer is yes. They would have to go through a lot of procedures, but states go through constitutional revisions depending on the state and also special sessions all the time. We mentioned this on last week's show, but it bears repeating for those of us that weren't with us last week, that the governors, the Democratic governors, actually just got out of a conference with each other. And what the reports are that I heard of the people who attended the conference, they were pumping each other up and saying, we got to fight back. So I would look for a lot more support and fire coming out of the Democratic governors to do whatever is necessary. And we saw it when Hochul's recent speech. Pritzker's been amazing, but that man's been standing up and speaking truth. The Colorado governor, we saw Roy Cooper decide to run. He's termed out as North Carolina's governor. He decided to run for Senate, so he's stepping up in his own way. We're starting to see more fight, right? Talking about, oh yeah, we've got people. Brianna's mentioning that felon Paxton. Yeah, like, well, I guess he's not a felon because they never were able to convict him. But yes, I agree. Paxton is trying all kinds of crazy stuff to bend and break the law. Um, so okay, believe it or not, we're only 2 stories in. We've got a whole nother story. Our top story of the hour. Um, we've got and Sarah, you're doing such a great job. I want to thank Sarah, who's our chief of staff, our political fixer. She handles everything and makes sure I have what I need, I'm where I need. She takes care of everything. She's doing everything to make sure I see all of you guys as much as possible online because it goes so fast. I want to say again a thank you to all of our gifters and our supporters. We're already at 57,000 likes. That's amazing. And you know what that deserves? It's time. It's time for our third story. It's story time. For those of you that have not joined us for a Political Fixer Live, we try to do at least one story where we provide a little bit of context. So we just don't talk about what happened today. We give you a little bit of a narrative to lean into it. And for tonight's story hour, then we're going to go back to February 1933. And we're going to talk about our top story in the context of what happened in February of 1933. I am not a historian. I barely passed history. And in Texas, once it got to the Alamo and the San Jacinto Monument, we kind of stopped paying attention. But I verified all of this. So get ready for possibly the most salacious slash ridiculous story of the evening. We're going to go back in time to February of 1933, and we're going to talk about a parliament building that was in Berlin. The parliament building was housed in Berlin where they had all of their meetings and their votes and things like that. And on February 27th, this building, known as the Reichstag building, was set ablaze. And authorities found the person who did it. It was a 24-year-old Dutch activist named Marinu van der Lubbe. Not the most ridiculous person you're going to hear about in this story. But yes, the first ridiculous name of the story is Marinu van der Lubbe, found in the building 24 years old. According to officials, van der Lubbe confessed to setting the fire, saying that he was a worker there and that he was standing up for workers' rights and calling them to rise against the regime. He was a registered communist. It's the next part that gets a little bit tricky because the question was, did this 24-year-old just get upset one day and light this fire? Or was this a group effort? Was this the Communist Party actually trying to take over the government of Germany? And right now, to this day, historians agree that the fire happened. Historians agree that van der Lubbe was involved in setting it. There's heavy disagreement on whether or not he acted alone. And that part is important because it's what happened next within the next several hours that changed the course of history. Within 24 hours of the fire, the president of Germany at the time, President Hindenburg, the names here, I swear, signed the Decree for the Protection of the People and the State. And what that did is it protected from this communist takeover that they were so sure was going to happen. So they took over the local police department because they couldn't keep the city of Berlin, much less Germany, safe. So they needed to take over the police department. And within the next few weeks, they arrested thousands of people, ripping them off of the streets. Communists, socialists, people in unions, political opponents. It's estimated that between 4 and 10,000 people were arrested during that 4 to 6 week period. They were sent to detention camps that suddenly started to pop up all over the country. Vanderloop was arrested and later executed. In the meantime, elections were held in 1933. And many of you know the tragic end to this story because right after thousands of political opponents and others had been arrested, they held elections and 288 seats went to the Nazi Party. They helped the chancellor at the time make sure that he didn't have any more pesky rules he needed to follow to listen to parliament. He had free reign over the government. And that chancellor, as you probably guessed by now, was Adolf Hitler. And that would be the last free and fair election that they would have until after World War II ended. That date, that February 27th event, is known as the Reichstag fire. And I bring it up for a reason. We may have just had our own Reichstag fire. And I say that with all seriousness. I want to talk to you about events that unfolded over the last several days and draw some parallels. And then I want your opinion on what you think. This time, we are not talking about a 24-year-old young Dutch guy. We're talking about a 19-year-old Doge employee. His name is Edward Korestein. And again, this writing of this chapter of our history is just absolutely ridiculous. You might know him as Big Balls. That's right. The 19-year-old kid that worked in Doge, continues to work in Doge. This involves him. He was in Washington, D.C. Now, if you don't know anything about Korestein, let me give you a little bit of background because it matters. According to Wired magazine, Korestein is a high school graduate with absolutely zero government experience that Elon Musk brought in as a part of Doge to have full access to our government data. He once founded a company called Tesla Sexy LLC, and he worked for a startup that's known for hijacking for hacking. And hijacking code. At the end of June, people thought that Korstein had been fired, but actually, they were just quietly moving him to a new honeypot of data, the Social Security Administration. So, to our knowledge, the 19-year-old still has access to all of our Social Security data. He ran into some trouble several days ago in Washington, D.C. Around 3 a.m., when all of the best decisions are made, he was walking around the streets of Washington, D.C., and he was severely beaten. There are photos of him, black and blue, with blood running down him. He was with his significant other, Emily, so cute. And he said, Korestein said, what happened is that there was a gang of violent thugs, at least 10 of them, and he was beaten up because he was trying to save a woman from a carjacking that happened. So when he rushed to save the woman from 10 violent thugs, then he was beaten up. But so far, we've only been able to find two of the violent thugs, and it's a 15-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl. So, did this fire start on its own, or was there help? How many thugs are there? Use your own decision making. Do you believe that it was a violent gang that this 19-year-old was going to confront? And if so, can you answer for me how all 10 of them were going to fit in the car that they were going to steal? That's one little question that I have, but I'm sure it's totally true. Or did the 19-year-old Doge employee with zero accountability mouth off to the wrong people and they beat the crap out of him? And it turned out that it was two teenagers. Which one do you think is true? Society may never know. I'm sure historians will be debating this for years to come. But it's what happened next that really should bother us. So Korestein was attacked. Was it provoked or was he being a hero? Again, we may never know. That was on Sunday morning. By Tuesday, the current president of the United States had posted photos of him after he was beaten with the blood and whatever, and said that because of gang violence, he would need to federalize Washington, D.C. Because remember, it's not just one fire, it's a communist takeover. It's not one just assault, this is a crime wave, and he needs to step in. So 47 implemented a law called the Home Rule Act. And this is only supposed to be for emergencies where the president and Congress can take in and offer more oversight to Washington, D.C. when necessary. And the state of emergency in this case, according to 47, is that there is a dangerous and urgent crime wave. One slight problem with this narrative is that actually, according to police data, violent crime in DC is down. It's down 26% compared to last year alone. But if you look at the trends, it's a 30-year low in Washington, DC. That crime is down. Violent crime is actually down, according to local police. But let's be fair. Maybe police have no idea what's going on in their city. Maybe they don't know their own data. Maybe they're covering it up for whatever reason. So we should probably go to someone higher. Why don't we ask the director of the FBI, Kash Patel? Because Kash Patel, actually, that Monday, remember this announcement came on a Tuesday, that Monday, he had just delivered a speech. This is what Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, had to say. This is a quote. The murder rates are plummeting. We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in US history. Slight problem with their narrative, kind of conflicts, but okay. We can't trust Kash Patel. He barely comes to work. The guy looks like he's scared all the time. Let's go to the brand new U.S. District Attorney for Washington, D.C., and lover of boxed wine, Jeanine Pirro. What does Jeanine Pirro say? Because this is a Fox News host. Like, she's going to have some scary things to say about crime in D.C., right? And it just so happens she just made a speech at an event called the National Night Out. This is when members of the community and law enforcement, they bring kids, and her speech, as one of the first things she got to do, one of the first events as the new US attorney, Lord help us, her quote: crime is going down in DC. It's going down in DC because of you, because you as parents teach your kids respect, because of law enforcement who make sure that they follow cases until they're solved, and because of our partners. So crime is down. Police are doing a great job. The FBI director says we're on track for a record awesome year as far as violent crime goes. DC is safe, but facts don't matter. Facts don't matter. We already talked about that earlier in the show. When the fire was set, the Reichstag fire was set, Hitler was reported to have said that it was a sign from heaven that now was the time that he was going to implement the final stages of his plan to rise to power. If that's the case, then this beating of the Doge kid was a sign from hell, making sure that a madman can continue his own ambitions. 47 announced that he would deploy 800 National Guards to DC. So, just to be clear, once again, our military is being deployed on American soil. But now we're not even pretending to just beat up and capture those awful foreigners, right, that are a threat to everyone. There's no pretense of othering. There's no pretense of the enemy here. We have American troops on American soil being deployed to intimidate and arrest Americans. This is a next step. Don't get me wrong. The other steps also horrible, should not have happened, period. But this is a progression. They're already bragging about the arrests that they made. They're saying they've arrested all these people already. ABC News looked into those arrests, and you'll be happy to know that they have captured people for such crimes as DUIs and subway fare evasion. So, good job, everyone. And they said this is just the beginning. Here's my question for you. Is this our Reichstag fire? Is this ridiculous, nonsensical, jerky little kid? Is this the start of the next phase? Or is it just 47 being 47? Right? Rensville says it's practice for martial law. Patricia says yes. Searching Eagle, I love that. Ingerberg says yes. Marlene says I fear. Square foot guarding for you says definitely. Um, you know, what happens next, right? What can they do? Again, these are idiots. There's only so many of them. If you see most of the footage of the people that are walking around DC that are National Guard, they're embarrassed. They don't want to do this, but they're doing it. They're showing up for work. Delarian says 1,000% setup. Interesting. Ooh, I love the conspiracy theory angle. Robbie's saying I'm a fear monger. Yes, absolutely, Robbie. You're correct. Everything I'm saying is blown out of proportion, and America's doing awesome. Thank you for letting us know. I look around and I see no real problems. I'm glad your life is perfect. Um, so Brianna says he tried in LA, but people were smarter than that. Yes, and they're fiery. Like I saw people standing up for their neighbors. Absolutely. Professor Liberty Esquire says martial law will not work in the United States. That's just certain people, like certain policemen in your head, that make you think that. Um, so I do think they'll try. I think, listen, it's one thing to try to defend a tiny few square blocks of LA and wreak havoc compared to LA. Like, notice that idea faded pretty quickly. It's one thing to like pick on a gardener or the guy that like serves your kid ice cream cones when they're defenseless and you sneak up on them in masks. It's another thing to just walk around and say, I'm going to torment you. It's one thing to say, I'm going to do this in DC, not the United States. It's one thing to say, we're going to have police state in Germany versus what we have, like the size and scope of things, right? That city stood up for itself. That's a great point. Sorry, who said that? Oh, user 5450. Yes, absolutely. I see that GM Patino is saying he will try, but sorry, it's scroll. We the people are not going to allow this to happen. Loop says the reason Trump sent the National Guard is because he's releasing Maxwell out of prison. I listen, I think that a lot of this with Epstein and Maxwell, and we've talked about that on other episodes, that is one of the few things, whatever they have on him is one of the few things that scares him. I do think that. But I don't want to go as far as to say that this stuff is a distraction because it is on its own bad. And him taking power was always part of the plan. He always wanted to exert power over people, particularly people of color, which that's what these communities have in common that he's naming: Baltimore, Chicago, Detroit. These are communities of color by and large. So that's not a coincidence, right? I want to like one quick little thing. So I've said how many parallels I think we have to the Reichstag story. I think it's only fair to talk about the differences. So in Germany they had to pass some laws that said that parliament had no more power. Our Congress just kind of said, yeah, we're good not having any power or oversight. So that's new. He doesn't even have to bother with that. The 24-year-old Dutch guy, he was executed. This 19-year-old Dutch guy, there's or a Doge guy, they're saying he's going to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Again, how much of this do you believe? Because I had to check everything. This story is crazier and crazier. So we know they're crafting this false narrative that he's just going to point and play toy soldiers with other people's lives, other people's families, other people's morals and ethics, right? I want to talk about one thing that you could do right now with this story. One thing that we could all do right now. And I would like to ask your permission to request a language change. I've been thinking a lot about this, and we talked a lot before about engagement. We're going to talk more about engagement another time, but we found out that one of the biggest things, according to data, that was the tipping point in this last election. The very short version is if people were engaged in the election and they paid attention to what was going on, they were 70% more likely to vote for Kamala Harris. If they didn't pay attention and they just took in bits of information, true or untrue, then we saw what happened, right? So it's really important that we bring people to the table of conversation as soon as possible if we're going to shift things. Talking to each other and building community, also important. We covered that earlier in the show. That helps all of us support each other. It helps our own mental health. It advances all of our causes and our organizing. So the community building with each other is important. But I would say as important is reaching out and creating content that invites other people to read or join the conversation in some way that aren't already as engaged as you are, right? And as I am. I try to be anyway. So I want to suggest a language change that I think makes this more relatable. There's been discussion on whether or not this president is an authoritarian. Is this authoritarianism? All right. So let's run through that. Are we on the path? I'm going to read you really quickly the 6 steps, the 6 signs of authoritarianism. So basically, and I looked all of this up because again, not an expert, it's when power is concentrated in the hands of a single leader, small group, or ruling party, where individual freedoms are restricted in the name of control, stability, or an ideology. That's the definition. But there's 6 features. So you tell me if any of these match. Number 1, centralized power. Decisions come from the top down with little to no input from any of the checks and balances and little to no input from the public. That's step 1 for authoritarianism. Step 2, limiting political freedoms, particularly freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, the ability to protest, and criticizing the government. That's step 2. Step 3, weak or non existing opposition. They might be banned, controlled, or really not be competition at all. We could talk about that all day, right? So that's step 3. Do we have weak or non existent competition? Number 4, control over media and information, like removing things from the Smithsonian or telling newspaper outlets that they can't edit the way that you like, having your bureaucratic billionaire friend buy one of the most famous newspapers in the world, having CBS be sued about the editing of a 60 Minutes piece, or firing Stephen Colbert because he hurt your feelings. That's step 4. Step 5 on authoritarianism, rule of law, rule by law, but not rule of law. And what I mean by that is that the laws are applied selectively to the people who matter versus the people who don't. Like, if you're an immigrant, then you don't get due process. If you're a woman and you're a victim, we're not going to hear you out. We're going to protect the predator. If you are someone who is a congressman who gets caught, in an abuse situation, we'll give you a pass. But if you're a congressman trying to oversee abuse in ICE detention centers, we're going to arrest you. That kind of thing. And of course, the big one, number 6, use of fear and propaganda. Through messaging, they try to threaten their enemies and silence them. So here's my suggestion. When we look at all this, basically, this is about government control. Authoritarianism is a big word. It is hard to understand. It sounds like I'm getting ready to take a college course. Those people that are in the know, they debate, is it really, is it not? This is a government takeover. This is government control. And when we use language like that, it's stuff that everyone can understand. So I would humbly suggest that, as you guys, and some of you are doing great content out there, documenting what's happening and sharing it with your audience, can we lose some of the big words that are debatable, that are a distraction or alienate people trying to join the conversation, and go for simple, punchy words like government control and government takeover? That is what I would suggest. I see so many messages coming in. I see Joe Eclectic, hostile government takeover. Yes, love that. Get descriptive. Love it, love it, love it. Marlene says, name it and claim it. Right? Absolutely. Martha, good idea. We do you think we're already there? I'm not saying I don't know what there looks like. I'll be honest. I don't know what it means for all of us, but are we currently in the middle of a government takeover? Right? Um, Let me look at it's Delarin says this has been the playbook since 2016 and a surge in 2020. Absolutely. He kind of went back and just got stronger and then came back ready to just dismantle everything, and somehow found worse people to surround himself with, right? Joe Eclectic says we're not there yet. There's too many of us and plenty of independent journalists. Great point by Joe Eclectic. There are still a number of amazing independent journalists. And actually, I need to credit 2 of them for this broadcast. I use Democracy Docket to understand some of these Supreme Court cases. And I also have been relying on the Mississippi Free Press for some of their reporting on what's been happening on the ground with some of these stories, particularly in the South. So I want to give credit to some of our smaller and our independent journalists, but all of you on TikTok, all of you that have YouTube channels and podcasts, all of you with blogs that are doing so much storytelling to bring people into what's happening, all of you are basically independent journalists at this point, right? Um, so the Nev says on our way there, and it's only 7 months in. That is crazy. Pup says they are trying. Project 2025 is working it. Um, Stealing our voices. In all honesty, this has been a 40-year plan. That is fair. I think we're seeing a lot of escalation, but this didn't come overnight, right? There are people that are in power that are still mad about the Civil Rights Act. Let's just be, there are people in power like the guy who's the head of the Department of Defense right now, who this week retweeted something that said that women shouldn't be allowed to run for office and women shouldn't vote. So, yeah, this has been here for a while, but it's just been gaining steam. Okay, Brianna's saying stealing our voices, rights, and control what we can do, who we can do it with, and when. I think they're trying. Someone, Nev, saying it feels like 7 years. They absolutely do. Um, so, people are asking, okay, we're aware what's happening. How and what do we do? So let's end on that note, right? We're at 90,000 likes. It's been a stacked program, right? We had so much to discuss, and let's keep that discussion going for a little bit. But let's end with what can we do? All right, there are special elections happening, municipal elections happening. Some of you guys have gubernatorial elections happening this year. We talk a lot about midterms, but you can get involved now in what's happening. And some of these seats, they can be flipped even now. I was just speaking to a young woman who took her gap year after in between college and law school, and she's working on a special election in Texas. We have a special election that just got announced that could break part of the supermajority in Florida for the state Senate. There are so many different things that if you want to get involved in elections, that's one option. Number two, creating more content that explains things to people. It doesn't need to be hour-long programs like this one, but something that takes one piece and doesn't just say, hey, this is what happened, but maybe take it a step further. This is what happened, and this is how it impacts you that you might not realize, or this is how we got here, or this is something you can do about it. Take that and go like one dot further. That micro content adds up so, so much. If you already have a platform like a live or a podcast or something like that, even a blog, consider interviewing people that are doing things, asking them about what's working for them and sharing that knowledge. If you're doing something that's working, sharing that knowledge with the rest of us as much as you feel comfortable doing it, right? Um, Building communities, I think that's going to be important. And then also, again, learning from past mistakes. We are not doing a good job reaching people that are at the fringes. And I don't mean MAGA. That's not what I mean. I am not someone that thinks that one day a bunch of these people are going to realize and wake up and it's all going to be different. I'm talking about people that were in that middle, that persuadable group, that persuadable middle. We just kind of were like, obviously he's awful. How no one's going to vote for him. There was an assumption there. And we discounted how many people are what we call low engagement voters. It's 1 out of every 5 voters on both sides of the aisle, by the way, including independents, actually. So all sides of the political spectrum, 1 out of every 5 voters is disengaged. They are undereducated about what is happening, not implying a lack of intelligence, but they tune it out for whatever reason. And before we judge people too harshly on that, have any of you ever had a baby? I don't remember any movie that came out for the first 2 to 3 years that my daughter was born. Like, we'll stumble upon a movie, I'm like, "I didn't know this existed." They're like, "Yeah, you had a baby during that time," right? Have you ever cared for an aging parent? Have you ever had to try to take a second or even a third job? There are a lot of reasons. Have you ever had a health issue that has consumed you? There are so many reasons that people might not be paying attention. Doesn't make them bad or selfish, right? So reaching out to them now, as some of them are coming up for air, that baby goes to kindergarten or whatever the case might be, that is a great group of people to reach out to, right? Um, so a lot of reasons why we should not be convinced that our neighbors are our biggest threats, that we are each other's enemies. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it, right? There are some concerning individuals. I live in Florida. I know of what I speak. I'm not delusional about that, all right? I'm not saying there's not. What I'm saying is numerically, way, way, way more people that are like, what the heck is happening? And with these tariffs and the rising prices and the chaos on the news and the situation getting more crazy with everything, that number is going to go up. That number of people that are like, what is happening and how can I make it stop is going to go up. Okay, Square Foot Gardening is saying get ready for September 1st rallies. That is great if you want to share some information with that. I see there's a Boston Tea Party in Tampa, some people in Gulfport. Oh, cannot believe you're in Gulfport, girl. I did not know that. Okay. Let's go ahead and do some more shout outs here. I want to say again hi to Jenny Bean, Musical Melodian, Wendy R, The Visionary Girl, Susie B. Apparently, you guys have been crushing it. The Nev, Steph, Julia, Dirty Bad Blogger, Divine AF Girl. You guys have been bestowing gifts upon myself and my team for tonight, and we so appreciate you. That really makes our day. We're at 98,000 likes, so that's awesome considering the depressing content matter. I want to say hi to GCWIP, GC Whip maybe, because apparently you have also now joined fan club status. Again, do not know what that means, but I love it. Love Equivana's name. I want some backstory on that. And we have Pet Care Coach, Professor Liberty Esquire, Keisha Davis, Dr. Keisha Davis, forgive me, and also Sharon Cryer that have also been sharing the live, which is amazing. And let's see. I want to get a couple more user comments on. Okay, so Aunt Molly going back to our lovely Doge 19-year-old saying if he were really beaten up in Washington by a gang, he would not be able to talk about it. Such a good point. You don't talk about Fight Club. Uh, talking about the watching the Supreme Court cases and Democrats standing up. um, Many of the Democrats now are saying they're headed back to Texas. People are asking about that. I saw a report about that coming across my desk as I was coming on the air and into the studio. I don't have an update for you in Texas, but I think that whatever is happening there, that standoff has ended. If I have to guess, they're probably either someone caved and went back and they got it passed now, or they're going to get it passed later. But here's what I will say on the positive note: just them leaving and being willing to put themselves in harm's way elevated what was happening. It put it in common discussion. It dominated the media cycle. Not easy to do right now. They changed the narrative and they made people force attention on the issue. Sometimes the win is the conversation. Sometimes we can't get a victory right in that moment, but it got political and public support for Gavin Newsom and the governors of New York, Colorado, Illinois, and others to say that they are going to consider their own, again, fighting fire with fire on gerrymandering. I got this. So it did work building that public support. It did make a difference. And also, I'm a big fan of encourage the behavior you would like to see. We're telling Democrats to stand up. We're saying fight no matter what. We're saying to do something. So even if they lost this battle, which is highly possible, I say this with all Texas love, we still should encourage the behavior. So I hope that we do so. Um, Lo-Fi Junkie asking if Newsom is the likely Dem candidate in 2028. I do not even know if we're going to make it to 2026, but assuming that my liver holds out until then, because this has been a rough 7 months, what I will say is he's definitely polling well. I think Gavin Newsom is going to have a little bit of trouble selling that California charm to some of these other states. So it'll be interesting. It'll be also interesting to see how far we end up pushing the ticket left or whether we end up correcting more towards the middle. I'm not sure yet. So much more time to go on that race, though, and I still think heroes might emerge, like newcomers. We didn't know who Governor Walz was until just recently, and look how fast he found his way into our hearts, right? Martha saying, giving us an update on Texas, saying that Abbott is going to call special sessions until it's done. Yeah, like if you're ready to surrender to the president on being his errand boy, knock yourself out. People are saying go left, saying that, oh, shout outs to Florida. Okay, so let me say we're going to be doing some events in Florida and other states. So we talked about this before. Let me just end with this before we wrap up. October 2nd. No, I just lied to you. September 2nd. See, it's been a long 7 months. Let's try this again. September 2nd, which is a Tuesday. 9 p.m. Eastern. That is our next scheduled live. if we have Wi-Fi and the ability when we're on location, we're going to be posting content at Political Fixer, so definitely go there, and we will try to do stuff in the meantime. But our next live is going to be September 2nd. So we're off for 2 weeks, but we're still out there working. Actually, we're going to be doing a lot of work. And so if you want to be plugged in, then definitely follow at Political Fixer. But also, if you can, go to politicalfixer.com. We have an email address. It's a real one, a phone number. It's a real one with real people, or a contact form if you prefer. Make sure you sign up to get our updates, because starting in fall, we're going to be doing weekly updates, which tell you where we are, what is new, candidates that we've discovered that you might want to know about, things that are happening in your community, the latest and greatest of everything. We're going to do a weekly update. So if you can and you would like that, then definitely make sure you go to politicalfixer.com. It's 100% free. We're just trying to kind of bring our community in closer. Um, so I know that there's a lot of news. I know there's a lot of tension, but here's what I'll say. First of all, a lot of what they're doing are not signs of strength, they are signs of weakness. It's still annoying, but they're signs of weakness, right? You don't ask for rigging of an election if you think you're leading. You don't ask to try to change the rules if you think you're going to win the game, right? You don't get out there and put a bunch of men and women in the military to flex if you're feeling safe and strong. These are all signs of weakness. He's getting tanked on the economy, and that is just going to get worse for all of us. He's being laughed at across the global stage. He just got called home to daddy because Putin's going to rip him a new one in Alaska, right? Like, he's going to Alaska. This guy is going to be completely eviscerated. People are turning on him. His cabinet is shrinking. People are disappointing him. He can't force people to like him. He's still not cool. He broke up with Elon. That was sad and hurt his feelings, right? So there's all these things. This is a weak person. He's always been a weak person. So, yes, we should be concerned. He's doing real damage. He is ruining people's lives. That is real, but he can be defeated. He absolutely can. And you guys are the key to all of that, right? The big breakup. Yes, Joe Eclectic, right? Aunt Molly says he keeps calling Alaska Russia. Who knew we would have someone dumber than Sarah Palin, right? Uh, can't keep it together at this point. So many things that we can discuss: the health issues, the wandering on the roof, whatever. It's a problem. He is a problem, but we are the solution. All of you are the solution. For those of you that were feeling down before, I know we covered a lot of heavy news, but I hope between talking out some of the potential solutions, how we can collaborate and start getting to work in different creative ways, and then, of course, the support from our Political Fixer family that is so great to each other. I see all these amazing conversations happening. I feel like that. Oh, I see Mother Trucker. I see Meister. I see other people that stepped in and did a lot of support on this episode. Thank you so much. We hit 110,000 likes, everybody. Yay! I want to do my greatest Kermit yell. Yay! Okay. um Rachel, I appreciate all of you. Thank you for tuning in as usual, for all of the support. We're not going anywhere. Actually, the opposite. Sarah and I are going to be hard at work. So mark your calendars with these lovely glasses. Mark your calendars for September 2nd. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And at Political Fixer, we'll be posting more content sooner than that. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and go give them hell. Safely, of course. All right, everyone. See you later. Thank you. Appreciate all of you. This is going to be great. I can't wait for the live events to come in fall. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait. We got so much fun together, everyone. Hang in there. All right. Awesome. Great job, everybody.